We're going to get started here. I'm in the GAM office. It's always exciting to start one of these rule sessions because it means that we're close to having the tournament season start. We're about 3 months away from our first tournament. So I hope you're all excited to get going and to be part of these Wednesday rule sessions. The format is very informal, as interactive as we can possibly make it. Don't feel intimidated to ask a question. We all learn from every question that everyone has. So I think there's a lot of new volunteers that have been signing up. I'm glad to see that. This first session is going to be probably boring for a lot of the old timers. We're going to be going through a lot of the administrative issues, as well as going over some of the volunteer packet, and eventually we'll get to the subject of how to make rulings out on the course and what to expect and things to consider when you're making those rulings. So to get started, you can see I'm on the GAM volunteer. If you log in, I'm at the volunteer. I'm on the main page of the GAM login. And get to the GAM volunteer page. I scroll down here under volunteer, and it brings up it gives you the tournament volunteer, the upcoming events, and there are 3 views here. How do I minimize that? Okay.
If you want to talk, I'll just get people in.
So we're at the volunteer page, volunteer main page, and there are 3 different views here. Well, actually more than 3. There's you can click on my schedule, which will tell you just the schedule of the tournaments you have signed up for. There is the screen that allows you to look at the volunteer tournament dates and tells you tournaments are on what day and where they're located, and it tells you the number of spots. And you can sign up by clicking over here to request this event, and you can go through that format. And probably most of you already have done this because a lot of new people have signed up for tournaments already. The master schedule shows you all the tournaments for the year, and it shows you the people who have signed up already.
Okay, should get in there.
Who's having trouble getting in? And this last screen is the volunteer apparel screen, which probably has not been updated yet. It'll probably be another month or 2 before that'll be updated, but you'll need to go to that screen if you want to order any GAM apparel with GAM logo types of clothing or clothing or your earpiece or other items on that GAM website. So if I go back to the main page again,
No, you're good.
On the right-hand side here, we're going to start by looking at the volunteer section. And there's some resource materials over here that I encourage you to at your leisure, go through, take your time, and study some of these areas. There's a lot of good material. A lot of time has been spent on putting these together. We're going to start by looking at this item right here. It's a PDF file, GAM referee trouble hole. It talks about as most new volunteers will be trouble hole volunteers. So I'm going to walk you through part of this, and we're going to go through the different areas. The very first portion I want to mention, though, is the very top is bolded. Talks about how you are, as a GAM referee, you are representing the association staff, officers, governors, and fellow volunteers. So it is imperative that your conduct is always professional and courteous. mentions how we as such are, as a volunteer, you interface with tournament golfers who to the GAM are our valued customers. And we have to keep that in mind as we are out there interfacing and interacting with them. As a GAM volunteer, our uniform is long khaki tan slacks. Should say tan in there. And a white shirt, preferably with a GAM logo. And that you can get a GAM logo shirt by going to the GAM apparel page, and you can look at the very nice shirts they have there. They're very well priced, and they're nice enough. You can wear them to Sunday Mass if you want. For the men, mentioned long khaki slants. Ladies can wear those slacks that go, I guess, mid calf. Capris. And I mentioned the uniform is long khaki slacks. We are still somewhat of an old-fashioned organization. We do not allow our volunteers to wear shorts. Your arrival time will be posted when you get an email about a week prior to your work date. You should get an email telling you your assignment and what time you should report. If you do not get that email, you should call someone in the GAM office to check on that, because it may have gone to your spam folder, or you need to talk to someone and find out what may have happened about your report time or your assignment. So it's important that you see that. You can always check and go to I think you can check the assignments on the GAM volunteer. One of the pages will tell you your assignment once it's been posted. Now, if you do have a problem and you do need to cancel out of your assignment, after you've received that email, do not go to the volunteer page and delete that assignment at that point, because no one from GAM will notice that you've deleted that. Once the assignments go out, they no longer check that website for assignments. You should call someone, email or call someone and tell them, due to some unforeseen circumstances, you are not going to be able to work. They'll understand it's not a big deal, but they will want to know that you will not be coming to work for your assignment for that given date. Okay. So it talks about the trouble people should assign to tell you what time you arrive. And the next portion talks about what items you should bring to the tournament site. You should have an earpiece. You'll be given a radio when you arrive. You should have an earpiece for your radio. You will need a golf rules book. You should have some means of stringing out for measuring whether or not a ball is out of bounds between OB stakes. And in some cases, you could experience quite a bit of distance between those OB stakes. So plan on having quite a bit of string. You should have a watch or something that allows you to time players while they are looking for a golf ball. We need to keep players within the rules, and when they can identify a ball, make sure they don't exceed 3 minutes looking for a lost ball. And in some cases, you may be asked to time a player to see how long it takes them to make a stroke. If we put players on the clock, and if you're on that trouble hole, the rover may ask you to see how long it takes a player to make a stroke, and as you get asked that to do that, you'll be given further instructions on how to do that. But there, further down here, there is a little bit further information on how we time players on how long it takes them to make a golf stroke. So when you arrive at the course, you will be getting you'll report to the GAM headquarters. You will get a packet. And I am going to find that packet right now. Oh, I got it.
Yeah, look back to, I think you got it there.
Go here.
No, another Chrome right
This
there.
one.
Go to that is.
Excuse me, are we allowed to ask questions in between?
Sure. Hey, someone got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Gary Corbin. I'm down in Florida right now, but
It's this.
with regards to timing a player to take a stroke, not for looking for a lost ball, but just taking a stroke. When does the time start?
The time starts when the player is ready to make a stroke. When it's clear to, when there's no interference. Players,
Okay, so
the players
they
have
take a stroke.
the players have cleared the green.
Okay.
And everything, they've walked to their ball, they've walked to their ball and everything is clear. At that point, they should be preparing to make a stroke. If everything is ready for them to go, at that point, the clock should start. Like, for example, taking yardages.
Did they send your email? I don't see them on this.
Here, Craig, I'll jump in here and answer the
What kind
question.
of thing?
Gary,
Yeah.
yeah, so I know you got the trying to find it up. So Gary, it's a good question. It's going to vary on a couple things, whether the player is the first person to play in the group or the last person to play in the group. But basically, we start the clock when it's their turn to play, and there's nothing preventing them from playing. So, like Craig said, the green's cleared. So when it's their turn, that clock starts. And then, there could be things that could pause the clock. You might have a big wind gust come up. You might pause the clock there for, 5 seconds or whatever as the player backs off. And then once they get back into their thing, then you'd start back up. But a good rule of thumb is that it starts when it's their turn to play and everything's clear and out of the way.
Great, thank you.
And it is a little different procedure when the ball is on the putting green. And that's covered further down in the volunteer packet or the guidelines that we're going through, because the players allowed, before the clock starts, the players allowed time to walk onto the green, clear loose impediments, repair ball divots. That would not be considered part of the time in getting ready to make a stroke, his or her stroke.
One more clarification on that question. You mentioned pausing the clock. So the clock is paused, not reset.
Pause would be paused. Yeah, the clock would be paused, not reset. Okay, so when you arrive at the golf course, you will be given a golf packet, volunteer packet, and it's going to contain the site information. It's going to contain the people working that day, their assignments, report times. The next page is going to be the notice to the competitors. This will be the notice to the players. This will contain the whole locations for the day. And normally we don't, as a trouble hole person, you probably would want to check the hole you're working, but basically if you look at hole number 1, the 39 over here tells you the depth of the green is 39 yards. The hole is located 27 yards on and 10 yards off the left edge. And the +8 means it's +8 from the center back to the hole location. Figuring that the
Isn't it
center
feet?
is, say, the center of the green would be 20 or 19, say. And so it's +8, making it 27. That's what that +8 means.
That's in feet though, not
No, it's in yards.
It's in yards.
tw-
Yeah, 39 yards is the depth of the green.
Oh,
27 yards.
I'm sorry.
27 yards on, 10 yards off the left. Now, it can be somewhat confusing sometimes based on the shape of the green. So don't try to become overly clever on trying to figure out if we're off by a few yards, because there's a graphic somewhere, and I think it's in the rules book, telling you how to walk off the green, because you start from the very front edge, wherever the front edge may be way off to the left, but it's you start from the center, but at the very front edge, and walk towards the middle of the green, and then back towards the edge of the straight parallel, a 90-degree turn from that line. So anyway, the whole locations are here. Just not too critical for you to know about those.
Yeah, just to go on that point, if you check the hole locations, we have definitely appreciate you guys doing that. As long as it's in the general vicinity and not 4 or 5 paces off, that's fine. As Craig was kind of alluded to, how I pace the greens might be different than Ted or Ken. So as long as it's in the same general spot, that helps us. Obviously, if it's off or if it's like on the right side of the green, side of the left, please let us know. But it doesn't have to be precise because everyone has different cadence they walk, or even the person who cuts the hole to start the day might have different cadences. So as long as it's about the same what's on the sheet, that's great. If not, please let us know.
So as this first page is very critical for you as a volunteer, it is very important, and I can't stress that enough, for you to read through this and make sure you understand what the local rules are for the day, because it could impact the hole you're on. Especially important if you are on, if you're on hole number 7 or 8 for this tournament, it's very important that you know how we are defining out of bounds for those holes. So you'll be able to handle any rules questions from the players regarding that. And note up above, the format is defined, 18-hole stroke play competition. Play will be from the black tee markers. We always tell the players what tee markers they are to play from. And it'll always say, please ignore all course ball drops. And it says that on the hard card too. Now, if there is a ball drop, it'll be mentioned down here in a specific paragraph for a particular hole. It'll say hole number 14 has a ball drop to the right front edge of the right front of the green. And if you're on hole 14, you need to know that is there, and give the players on that hole that option if they are in the penalty area and that ball drop is one of the options that is available to them. It'll talk about ground under repair situations. In this particular course, we had a wrong green situation. These 2 holes had a double green, so we needed to have the players know how to deal with that. We talked a lot about bunkers last year, because last year due to COVID, we had, for a lot of the tournaments, we had disturbed areas in the bunkers. We treated as ground under repair for the live ball only. I do not think we are going to do that this year. I'm pretty sure we're not. Most courses are back to normal. Most courses will have rakes out there. So you probably won't be seeing much in the way of bunkers. Unless we are at a course that has a lot of deer traffic or a lot of animal traffic in bunkers, we might have a local rule allowing players to rake the bunkers for animal damage for live ball. But that's going to be fairly rare. And if it's not listed, animal bunkers is not treated as ground under repair under the normal USGA rules of golf. So these are very important local rules for you to go through and remember. For qualifying tournaments, this is a qualifier for the Michigan Amateur. We will always have down here the number of qualifying spots and the number of alternates. Alternates will always be 2. And it will tell you the number of qualifying spots. This number could vary, but I can't begin to tell you how many times I'm out on the course and I hear rules officials, referees call in asking for how many qualifying spots we have today. Well, it tells me they did not look very carefully at their local rules, because it's always going to be on this sheet. So please take the time to look at it and remember it, because players very well could be asking you that. They're probably the worst people that will read the local rules, whereas they should be the most important rules for them. They probably rarely do.
Greg,
Yeah, go ahead.
one thing about hole locations and tee markers, generally speaking, isn't it true that the rover for each, the front and the back, should have checked both the hole locations and set the tee markers before a trouble hole official referee shows up? But it's a good idea to double check that, especially, in my opinion, tee markers. If we're playing the blacks, but there happen to be blues or whites or something else in close proximity, it's certainly the trouble hole official's responsibility to make sure players are playing from the correct tee and can set some of those other colored markers off to the side, assuming they put them back after the fact.
It's a good point, Lee. Yeah, it is the rover's responsibilities to set tee markers and check hole locations, but
When it comes-
it's always a good idea to double check that. And in the case of looking for tee markers that are, double sets of tee markers that are maybe too close together that may confuse the players, it's always a good idea to, have those removed and set them off to the side.
In regards to the number of qualifying spots, the starter should inform all the players of that information before they start the round.
It's a good point. Yes, that's true. Thanks, Marv. Okay, so after you've studied and looked at the local rules, this page will be updated for 2022. It's called the GAM hard card. This will not change throughout the year. These are our rules that will have in place for every tournament. Except for the USGA. The USGA has a separate set of hard card. They will have their own hard card for the qualifiers that we conduct for the USGA. But here again, we tell the players to disregard all course local rules and dropping zones. So no, it's a good point. If you do see if you're out on a trouble hole and you see a ball drop zone sign sticking out somewhere, it's probably a good idea to take that sign and just temporarily, lay it down or set it aside somewhere so the players don't get confused by that. But you can go through here, later on in the week and look, read through this. I'm not going to go through it all, but we cover, we talk about, GAM does have a code of conduct and we do have procedures for that. Because when we get to the rule number 1 about code of conduct, USGA rules in itself, their only penalty for code of conduct is disqualification unless the local rules stipulate otherwise. And we do have rules for a step-by-step process for players that are in violation of code of conduct. So this is the second page of the volunteer packet. You will then get a sheet, a roster of the players, tee times and groupings. And this is a routine off. We're double teeing this qualifier. We're going off number 1 and number 10. So it gives you all the players that are teeing off for this tournament. And if you do have Golf Genius downloaded to your smartphone, the Golf Genius, there should be a Golf Genius for the entire tournament, but there's also a Golf Genius for each group that the players will maybe asking you about. So this is their Golf Genius for them to, because players will be keeping score on Golf Genius this year, and they will have their own Golf Genius ID in order to do that.
So yeah, the one on the parent sheet here is specific to each player group. So if a
Is the
player,
Golf Genius up here?
so yeah, for each tournament, usually when we send out an email, we send out an all-encompassing Golf Genius for all of our referees that sees the leaderboard. On this parent sheet here, if you want to scroll up a little more. So this parent sheet here, this would be best used if say the A10 group, if Justin Suey came up to you and for whatever reason his Golf Genius code disappeared and he didn't have it, you can just quickly reference which player in the group needs that Golf Genius, and that code goes for every player in the group. So that's just helpful if a player loses their Golf Genius or needs help logging into Golf Genius or scorekeeping, they have their specific TGID for each pairing that.
Any questions about Golf Genius? You'll get used to it. It's some referees use them more than others. So this is the same roster of players for the day. This will give you the players in alphabetical order. So if someone comes up to you and asks you what tee am I at today, or what's my tee time, you can go to this page in the volunteer packet and you'll be able to quickly find their name and help them out. Tell them what John Johnson's teeing off at 8:30 on tee number 10. The next sheet is a pace of play matrix. It goes through every tee time. The players, it's going to tell you as a referee which where this group number 1, it tells you by hole what time the flag stick should be put into the hole For hole number 1, they should be completed by 8:14. And then in 12 minutes later, they should be through with hole number 2. They should be done at 8:26. So up here, it steps you through the hole by hole, 1 through 9, front 9, 10 through 18. The turn times are the time for the people to make the turn, and going from, if after players have completed 9, they go to 10, they're given 1 minute based on the distance. And going from 18 to number 1, it's a little bit longer walk, so they've been given a 4-minute allowance to make that walk. Thanks. So that kind of covers the details of the hole by hole times, as well as each group. And you as a referee out there, if you're on hole number 8, say, you should be tracking players coming through your group, making sure that players are meeting or exceeding those times on your pace of play matrix. We've asked the players to be within 13 minutes of each other. You'll see that on the in the guidelines. We have guidelines set where players are expected to be within 13 minutes of the group ahead. They could be beating this time, but if they are not within 13 minutes, and if they are after 9:50, say group 4 should be through at 10:27, and group 3 passed through here at 10:17, and group 4 is not showing up yet on the tee box, we have a problem. And you need to notify your rover that there's a group out of position, and the rover would probably start tracking that group and timing that group to see where the problems are. And we would not ask the trouble hole people necessarily to talk to groups. We normally leave that up to the rovers to talk to groups about that group being out of position. But it's important that we communicate as a team to let everyone know which group is causing some trouble with pace of play. And we all need to kind of maybe do some extra efforts to try to get that group to pick up their pace and to get back into position. So this is the matrix that we've provided. It's a very useful tool. You get busy out there, and you may not be able to track every group completing your hole, but as long as you have a general idea where groups are, and every so often you're checking this. It's important to note to check it every so often so we know where players are and whether or not they are in position or out of position. Any questions on a pace of play matrix?
Yes, is that matrix just for the referees, or do the players get this also?
The players do not have the matrix, but they've got their times on their scorecard. So each group group 1 will have this, will have the times along the holes where the holes are playing. They'll have these same times on their scorecard that they are.
Great.
Pardon me?
I said, that's great, thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah, we want them to know if we're asking them to play at a certain time, we want them to know what that time is.
Okay.
So following the pace of play matrix, we've got some additional information for you. Gives you some extra information about pace of play policy. It basically tells the players, and players have this too on their scorecard. It tells them that they can be they're on the clock at all times, that they may be timed at any time, and it's their responsibility to keep their position relative to the group in front of them. It's that they shouldn't. A lot of times you'll get players that'll say, "Hey, we haven't," but they'll say, "Well, we're not behind because we haven't seen the group behind us for like forever." Well, your response to them is right here. The group behind them is not their responsibility, it's the GAM's responsibility. All they got to worry about is the group ahead. If you want to get really smart, you could tell them you're playing the course forward, not backwards. And this goes into more detail about the pace of play policy. It talks about the 13 minutes. Talks about how groups are given group warnings if they're out of position. It is possible that we have a group that may not be necessarily behind their pace, but they could be substantially behind the group ahead. Say that they are still meeting their pace of play matrix, but the group ahead is, say, maybe a really fast group, and there may be like 25, 30 minutes ahead of that group. so there's a big gap. We may ask the rover or even a trouble hole person to watch the players in that group to see if there's one person in particular that is taking more than their allotted time to make a stroke. As we talked about, they should be recording times of under 40 seconds, and players that are not recording or that are not meeting 40 seconds, if they are causing substantial times for their entire group, they could be put on the clock themselves and be given warnings for a slow play penalty. We talked about how to begin timing. It goes in a little more detail. We talked about that a little bit. You can read that. It's going to be in your pace of play packet. And there may be circumstances when groups may be exempt from penalty. So penalties from pace of play, we generally have players very cooperative with us when we tell them they're out of position and they need to pick up their pace. If they are given an official warning, which we may do at times, usually giving them a card, and I hope we have cards this year to give them warning cards. If we issue the group warning cards, that generally will really motivate them to pick up their pace and close the gap between the group ahead of them.
Craig,
Craig,
Yes, go ahead.
are we changing our policy at all about kind of giving them a helping warning if they're a little bit behind? I know we've always said, well, we're not going to say anything, but I know a lot of us over the years have and just said, hey, you guys need to close the gap a little bit. On that, or we're kind of going with that same thought and idea?
Well,
Yeah, it's
usually I like the idea of watching them, giving them informal warnings. And maybe if they persist, then we can give each group a card, give each player in the group a card, make that their official warning. I mean, but you don't necessarily have to give them an informal warning. You could go right to to giving them a card if they're that slow and they don't seem to be, say you followed them for a couple holes and they don't seem to be making any attempt to pick up their pace, you may want to go directly to them and give each player in the group a warning card.
Yeah, once they get that warning card, they usually get going.
But before we take any warning actions, usually it's good policy teamwork wise to inform the game official in charge, the OIC, have some communication with the OIC, tell them you're watching a group and get their concurrence, his or her concurrence, that you want to give each player in the group a warning card for pace of play.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Dan.
Clarifying, don't we expect the trouble hole officials to contact the rover, the front or the back rover, depending upon their hole, and let the rover get involved and communicate with the official in charge or whoever before we issue any either warning cards or penalties or anything of that sort? Isn't that the procedure?
Exactly. You're right, Lee. We expect the rovers to be our eyes and ears out there. And then if you see issues, we would want the trouble hole referee to notify your rover. We would generally have a rover for the front nine and a rover for the back nine. So you'd contact the appropriate rover. You may want to even go off channel to a different channel and talk to your rover about the situation, give them some of the details that you would want to share. But yeah, the trouble hole people would be in contact with the rovers. So and again, eventually we would want the entire team of volunteers out there that day to know we've got a particular group that has potential problems, so we can all kind of key in on where they are at any given time to kind of spur them along and help them keep their pace moving.
I think it's also helpful from the trouble hole official referee standpoint that, let's say, the 840 group has been warned or has been given a penalty, and now the 852 group is behind them, for the trouble hole official to say to that following group, by the way, we've warned the group in front of you, we expect them to speed up. Don't let them get out of your sight now, just so that they are aware that they may be playing faster than they have for the first 5 or 6 holes or whatever it is.
And that's a good point. Yeah, the accordion effect sometimes is you'll get one group that we've warned, they'll take off, leaving people behind them in the dust. So it's necessary that we talk to the groups behind that group we've warned. So we can, let them know that, and they'll appreciate being told that, because they've probably been, bogged down by the group ahead somewhat. And they'll appreciate being told that the group's going to pick up their pace. So, just as a conflict, as an advisory, not that you're warning them, but just say, hey, just to let you know,
Yeah, as a
the top of the group
courtesy.
ahead, they're going to pick up their pace, and we just don't keep up with them. And we should do that for maybe, like you said, Lee, at least a couple groups, maybe even a third group behind them, so they all know what's going on. And the team will also know that we've done that as well. Anything else on pace of play or warnings or it's important again, and I'll talk about this throughout several times throughout today and future sessions. The volunteers that are on the course that day, we need to work as a team. We need to communicate as a team, whether it be regarding pace of play, code of conduct, rulings. It makes things more effective when we're sharing information and we all know what's going on out there.
I have a question. Is there any change in the pace of play for 2022 over the hard card?
Not that I'm aware of it. I mean, I
Yeah,
think we're going to keep it.
discussion.
Are there discussions on that? I guess there are discussions on that.
Okay, thank you.
We'll keep you guys updated to any changes.
Craig, I have a question, Bob Partridge here.
Okay, Bob.
If you're a whole volunteer and there's a ruling that needs to be made by the rover, what's the process for that delay in that group waiting for a ruling?
So you're saying, Bob, you as a trouble hole person,
Yes,
you want to call in the rover?
yeah, I'm calling in a rover, and if a group is waiting on the tee for the group in front of them to make a ruling, someone to come and make a ruling, what's our process?
I would suggest initially you contact your rover, and maybe the rover can talk you through it over the radio. You can you can unplug your earpiece and have the rover talk directly to the player. Maybe it can be done via a radio communication between the rover and the player. If it's necessary that the rover come to that location, then we'll take that into account where the player is falling behind. I mean, if there is a big delay in making a ruling, we'll have to take that into account for groups that potentially could fall out of position. But we will be talking to that group to make sure that they pick up their pace and try to get back into position. Now, if you've got one player involved, say you've got one player involved with a lengthy ruling, you should probably be telling the other two players to continue to play towards the green and to play up. And the player involved will, they can wait for the player near the green, or they can even hold out.
Okay,
Well, Craig,
thank you.
Craig, isn't it important that the trouble hole official, number one, is going to alert the rover over the radio? So everyone should hear that request for help. And then as a follow-up, then shouldn't the rover alert people, well, the 840 group got out of position because they had a delay for lost ball, or had three players had lost balls, or whatever the issue might be, so that again, the rest of the referees on other holes are aware of that.
It's a good point, yeah. Again, yeah, more communication, more sharing than we do. When you have an unusual situation, yeah, share it with the entire group so we all know what's happened out there. Okay, and the last page for the volunteer packet is just a quick rules reference guide. It's there for you to look at. You may have, just it's a reminder tool, gives you the options for under Rule 14, 3B, how the ball must be dropped and where it must come. We talk about immovable obstructions and abnormal course conditions in Rule 16. We talked about penalty area relief for both yellow penalty area and red penalty area, and provisional ball options, as well as unplayable ball options. So it's there just for you to use and review, make sure you are clear on things. But again, we do not expect referees to make a ruling if you are not 100% positive. And even if your first day on the job, you will be with someone else. You will be with a trainer for a while to help you get started. But you may have a ruling that you are pretty sure, but you want to. It's always good to double check it on the radio. Will be more than helpful. They are more than happy to share or to answer a rules question and get it right, as opposed to having a wrong ruling given to a player out on the course. So we should be calling your rover. The call would go to your rover, not to the OIC, for any question about a ruling. And in that same way, the other volunteers will also hear the ruling, and it may be helpful to them as well.
Yeah, just to jump on Craig's point. If you're not 100% sure, obviously it's better to err on the side of caution. It makes the tournament easier on our end if we get the ruling correctly there on where the ruling or issue occurs and having to deal with that scoring. So as I said, if you even have a shred of doubt, if you could please call into the OIC or the rover, that'd be appreciated. And as people who've worked our tournaments, we like to have fun and we like to chatter and stuff. But to that point, sometimes it's best if the jokes and the chatter isn't too extreme, because if people do have a rules issues, we need to have the airways clean for people to call in. So there's a fine line. Obviously, we like to have fun out there. We hope you guys have fun out there, and we appreciate you being out there to help. But when people have issues, we want them also to feel comfortable to call in, so we can get that squared away as well.
Okay, so I'm leaving the volunteer packet now. Going back to the document on the volunteer, GAM volunteer resource, the volunteer homepage. And it's back to the responsibilities of the Trouble Hole volunteers. So we talked about the assignment, talked about what you'll get, talked about using your pace of play timing sheets, the matrix. So we talked about you're getting a radio, and it's important that you have an earpiece. The radios, you may think it's pretty easy to use, but they can be a little tricky. I mean, they're not tricky. You just gotta make sure they're not turned down all the way, or they're turned off and you're on the right channel. You got to make sure they're plugged in properly. And also, when you make a call, make sure you don't start talking before you totally depress the send button, okay? A lot of times you'll hear a person and you can just tell they started talking before the send button has been totally pressed down, because you kind of catch them mid-sentence. So it's easy to do, start talking before you can get that send button totally depressed, but make sure you depress that button totally before you start talking. And then when you want to call someone, you use the person's first and last name, and then you wait for a response before describing the situation. For example, if I'm trying to contact Ken Harton, I would depress my send button, and I would say, in this case, I would say I'm trying to contact Lee Jewett. I'd say, Lee Jewett, come in, please. And Lee would reply.
Go ahead, Craig.
Okay, Lee, this is Craig on hole number 5. We've got a situation here. We got a broken down cart, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he'd explain the situation, and we got a different ruling. And then you'd get things straight away, the end of call, and then some referees, say over and out, 10-4. Make sure make sure the call is ended properly before you And then after you've stopped talking, make sure you undepress your send button so you can hear what Lee has to say. Sometimes as trouble hole people, trouble hole referees, there'll be a pair of referees on a one hole where you will be assigned to go to a different channel because you'll be needing to communicate a lot on that channel, and it can be too much interference for everybody else to be constantly hearing the two of you tell that tee shot went to the right, that tee shot went to the left. You know, that it's typically we need two trouble hole referees on a hole. It's because of a driving situation or some situation where usually they're communicating on every tee shot. So make sure you're always on the right channel. And if you get changed to a channel, remember that you're on that channel. So when you try to talk to your rover, you'll need to go back to the channel your rover is on before you can communicate with him or her, excuse me. So any questions about the radio use? You should always make sure you're on the right channel. You should always, you talked about just a couple of other things. You talked about your report time. Your assigned, you may be working the entire day, you may be working the AM or PM. If you need to get relief, the rover should be checking with you to make sure you're okay. But if you need to take relief for whatever reason, check with your rover. Don't just leave your assignment and let your rover leave the hole totally unguarded or unmanned or unpersoned. Check with your rover. The rover can come over and spell you, or we can find a way. Make sure that you are clear with the rover that you need to take a break, and the rover will assign or we'll deal with that and get you to take your break. The same is true for lunch breaks. You'll be given a lunch break. Lunch is provided by GAM, and where lunch will be provided will also be clarified by the OIC. It could be a halfway house. It could be the clubhouse. It'll depend on. It depends on the site. Okay, in some cases, when we feed the players for different tournaments, for the one of our first tournaments in the spring is the senior mid team tournament. We have three tournaments, 2 on one day and 1 the following week. That type of tournament, we play 36 holes. Format varies. We feed the players that day. The referees will eat the same food that the players eat. Okay.
Okay. No, I'm going to do it today. I think I'm going to go to the grocery store after lunch, and then after I go to the grocery store, I'll just swing by your house, or I'll go to CVS by your house. Okay. Okay. Well,
Yeah, whoever's on the phone, can you please mute yourself? Yeah,
I'm sorry. Can you? I'm sorry. Was
I've got a few things I need from the grocery store too. Can I get her to?
I'm sorry. I'm missing.
Yeah, we just muted everyone, so we're back to if you have a question
Was there-
or a comment, please, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. If there's a comment or question, can you unmute yourself and repeat that?
I do, definitely. The only thing that's different is the scale.
Okay. There is a couple of YouTube videos that I pulled up. This first is an interview with Andy McPhee. He's a retired former. Before I continue on with the video at this point, I can't emphasize or stress enough how important it is for us to own up to our mistakes with the players. I've had to do it. It's not easy. It's not fun to do, but you certainly don't want that player to go around the rest of the course or even future rounds of golf, knowing or with a false understanding of the ruling that you've just provided. That's incorrect. As soon as you find out you've made a mistake, which generally will happen as soon as they've left the area because you start thinking to yourself, you start having doubts to yourself. Did I just mess up? And you go back and look at your rule book and you find out, oh man, I mucked that one up. I gotta go. You gotta. It's important to go talk to the players and tell them what happened, explain to them, and to make sure that they understand that you made a mistake, and hopefully, and tell them they're not. It's committee error. They're not being penalized for it by any means, but you want them to know that they can't do that anymore in the future based on what you've told them to do. And it happens to us all. And one thing about making a mistake, it's not good, but usually it's a very good learning experience. You make a mistake once in an area and you always remember that, and you probably will never make that same mistake again. Any other comments on that from any other volunteers out there?
Good morning, Craig.
Is that Kyle?
No, this is John. Yeah, I just got out of a workshop, and they kept emphasizing to us, if you've never made an incorrect ruling, you don't have much experience.
So true.
Craig,
I have a question or
Yes.
statement. You got to keep in mind too, that if the player makes a mistake, breaches a rule, and then talks to the official, and he gives him an answer, the player is guilty of the breach. If the player also advances with the rules officials telling him how to proceed, and the official made the mistake, the player is absolved of the penalty.
Well, that's true. If a player takes direction from a rules official on which action to take and follows what the instructions of the rules official, the player is not subject to penalty. The player plays on. Absolutely right.
Question. If the player obtains direction from the referee and disagrees with the referee, is there an appeals process for them to go to someone else via the radio, or do they just play forward based on their knowledge of the game and then object to it at the end?
If a player is disagreeing with your ruling and you're pretty much sure you're correct, I would still go ahead and say, okay, I'll contact my rover, a more experienced rules official, and he's on the rules committee. And I would either bring the rover over to your hole, if possible, if it doesn't take too long, or again, put him on the radio, unplug your radio, and have your rover talk directly to the player on the ruling, so he hears it from somebody else. That's the action I would take.
Craig, I think you would go right to your rover first, and then if there's still conversation, then you would go to the official in charge or the committee, correct?
Well, the rover is on the rules committee, Dan, but I mean, you could, I don't know that I would necessarily trust Alex Clark on making a ruling. If he's the OIC, I don't know that I want to bring Alex Clark involved. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, we had that situation in the GAM last year. Right on the 18th hole where we had a ball in between the pump houses and trying to take the relief. Kenny came over and then we called you, and you were like the final person to say, no, this is where you're going to play from and take your relief, if you remember that.
Yeah, I mean, the more, if people are around and we can bring more people involved to get to satisfy the player, to make sure he understands that we're doing things fair for him. That's what's important, is that we're taking all the efforts we can to make sure we provide the right ruling for the player, that we're not trying to, we're pretty sure of what we're doing out there by.
Right, and the player was trying to use the full extent of the rules, and come to find out later on, he went to Ferris and had Mark Wilson as one of his instructors. And, he kind of told us about that, and he said, hey, you guys were right, so, but just sometimes they're trying to push the rules too, and you got to work with them.
That's a good point, Dan, because you will have players that they will push a point. They pretty much may know that they're not going to get relief from something, but they're gonna ask for it anyway. There's a funny story that we were told, I forget, in one of the rules seminars, I forget by who, but there was a player on, and this is a USGA rules official, referee nowadays. He was called over to give a player a relief for a stance from an obstruction. And, you ask for the player, which line of play you're going to take, and, how you going to make your swing. And he observed the player taking a stance, and the player was taking a very unusual stance. Let's put it that way. Very unusual stance. And the referee said, no, to me, you're not making a fair stance at that. I'm not going to give you relief for that obstruction based on, on where your ball lies and the stance you have available to you. And so he didn't give relief to the player. And then he, later on during the day, not much later, further on, he noticed that same player taking that same stance on every swing. He had an unusual stance for every shot he made. So he felt kind of bad that he didn't give the player relief from that obstruction, but you do what you can out there.
Hey, Craig. I just had a couple things I wanted to say. So I think there are some good questions that came in on the chat as well, and there's some good discussion around this. I think that what we're really talking about is players asking for a second opinion, right? And for those of you that remember watching, I think it was this year at the Ryder Cup when Brooks Koepka was in the bunker, and even at the highest level, they allowed Brooks to get a second opinion. And I think from our standpoint, if the player asks for a second opinion, we should try to accommodate that. And there are ways to do that, some of which you mentioned, just call the rover and, pull out your earpiece and let the rover talk to the player and go through and just explain the ruling again. Another way could be that what Dan Longeway mentioned, someone could come over and see it, and that's what happened at the Ryder Cup. But I think we should be in the habit of, if a player asks for a second opinion, granting that request and allowing them to get a second opinion. However, if it's the rover that's giving the first opinion, and the rover is the head rules person there's not really a second opinion in that case. So I think we want to, by default, if a player asks for a second opinion, grant that, but do it in a way, whether it's calling someone over or talking over through the radio. But we want to definitely allow that if the player wants it.
Yeah, good points, Kyle. Thanks.
Yeah. And then the last thing, I think you might have said it, but if we do have a situation where we do have a wrong ruling, it's important not only to talk to the player, but also to talk to everyone in that group. So the caddy, the other players, the other caddies, just so that just in case they saw it, so they don't take it and do it wrong, whether it's during the rest of the round or in future rounds.
Exactly. Okay, let's take before we continue. Well, so as a trouble hole person, when you get to your trouble hole, it's important that you do prepare for play at your hole, which means you should drive around, check out the landing areas, make sure you don't see areas that maybe you think should be marked as ground and repair. If they're near the fairway and they're, say the grounds are wet that day and your rover maybe didn't see a tractor rut just off the fairway that you think should be marked as ground and repair. You'd want to bring that to the attention of the rover or the OIC, and maybe we should mark that if it's not repairable. Check out bunkers and just prepare for what kind of questions you may think you may have to deal with as play comes through your hole. You may want to think about how where to position yourself so you've got a good viewpoint of players' tee shots, and maybe you need to see where the balls are landing. On some holes, on some courses, we have holes that say on the left side of Fieldstone, you've got hole number 14 or 15, you've got just bad country, it's just not marked, it's just bad country. And then further up, you've got an area marked as a penalty area, a red penalty area. So you will need to know whether or not that ball, where that ball last crossed the edge of the, could it potentially be in the red penalty area, or could it be a lost ball? So depending upon the hole you're at, you need to assess, the situations and where you need to position yourself. So even you've got guys like Andy McPhee going out there preparing, certainly we need to take the time too and prepare for the players that come through your trouble hole. Any other comments from anybody?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Craig, isn't it also, in my opinion, it's a good idea for both the rover and the trouble hole official to kind of review the hole, and trouble hole, you're there because in fact it's a trouble hole. So there's trouble somewhere. And so where you set up and what the relief options it might be, or what the issues are going to be faced, it's a good idea for both of you to kind of comment about it and make sure that you're, as I said, you're positioned in the appropriate spot before the play begins.
Right, the rover should come by and check with you to make sure you're okay and make sure you're comfortable with what you're facing, what kind of conditions you have there. But if you haven't seen the rover yet, call the rover over. The rover can find time. If you need the help, the rover will be more than helpful to he'll be more than willing to come over and provide help and answer any questions or discuss any issues you may be facing with. So certainly that's a good point, Lee. Thanks. Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute break here. We'll be back at let's come back at 11:30.
Okay.
Not that. How do I get out of this thing now? I want to exit this.
How you doing, Danny?
Good, Alex. How you doing?
No, this is Barry.
Oh, Barry. I'm all right. I'm just going to be officiating or refereeing a lot this year.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm going in to have my shoulder fixed next Tuesday.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I'll be playing August 15th, but I'm counting.
Hang on. Hey, I got to run. Hang on a second, okay?
All right. Hey, Craig,
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
have you talked to Kenny?
I heard about his water heater.
I keep trying to
Yeah,
ask.
is that what you're referring to?
Better to put one in than Simmons.
Is it already done?
I think they were doing it this morning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Your Simmons was telling me, he said that thing 6 months ago was $900. They're like 1,600 now.
Oh my gosh.
In 6 months, they've gone up that much.
We ordered a new cooktop for the kitchen, and it took like 4 months for delivery.
We ordered our furniture for down here in August this past year. We got it January 1st, the first week of January. But we got everything now.
That's good.
So
So did you have your surgery already?
no, next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday? Oh.
Yeah.
You're gonna be hitting the ball 500 yards after that, aren't you?
I'll be lucky to take the club back. I might be a broken down rules official for the rest of my life.
Tell the doctor to put in one of those swing aids inside your shoulder or something.
Yeah.
Make you an Iron Mike.
Iron Byron.
Iron Byron.
I mean, after I had the right shoulder done, it was great. But this one, he says, well, you're lucky. He goes, you're special. He goes, only 10% of the people tear it this way. Tore it complete in half. So, yeah, we'll see. And then it's 6 months of rehab.
You get to work more volunteer work.
Yeah, Kenny was happy about that. He said, well, at least you can work. I said, yeah, but you're losing a player. He goes, it doesn't matter.
I don't know. Is everybody probably haven't given enough time, right?
I mean, let's see.
That's just
Most people are back.
Are most people back on?
These sessions are recorded and put onto our YouTube channel. So if you ever want to go back and revisit them, that's where they'll be found. So I think we can go ahead and the people get back when they get back.
Yeah, let's continue on because it's already almost 11:25. I'd like to go through a few more things before we hit our deadline here. So we talked about pace of play earlier, but this is another section in the trouble hold responsibilities for the trouble hold person to kind of more give detail on what our goal is on pace of play. We want to be proactive in helping them stay in position, okay? It's going to make themselves happy, but more so it'll make the rest of the field happy if we have a good pace of play throughout the day. So our guidelines, we have a time par for each player, and it's listed on their scorecard. We talked about that on the matrix. So as a trouble hold person, you should be recording the finish times for the groups on your assigned holes, and that time is when the flag stick is put back into the hole by the last group, by the last player. And sometimes we have in the first threesome is the lead group, and oftentimes they will, because there's nobody in front of them, they will be jackrabbits, and they're speeding up around the course. So the second group I'm not going to worry about the second group if they're more than 13 minutes behind the lead group, because they're considered an exception, I guess. But so starting with the second group and third groups and so on, we want to see these groups to be within 13 minutes of each other, and a group that is more than that is out of position, and we need to start watching them more carefully to determine whether it's one player, the entire group. Rules officials, again, should be contacting your rover. You should need to notify your rover when a group is out of position and over their time par. And the rover may ask you, say there's a particular group he's been informed of. When that group, he may ask you on a future hole, say you're on hole number 12 and the group fell behind on hole number 8. He may ask you on hole number 12 to report back to him as to what time that group places the flag stick in. So he'll get an idea, he or she'll get an idea as to what kind of progress that group is making on picking up their pace and getting back into position. So we do not ask trouble hole people to talk to the group as it relates to their allotted time. They have the information they need in terms of what they need to be, where they need to be on their scorecard. So you can advise them that the information they need is on their scorecard, and you can contact the rover if they want to speak to someone about their pace. That you'll contact the rover and have the rover come and talk to that group. Okay. When we give warnings to groups, we usually give a warning to the entire group. Potentially, we could give a warning to one player if we see that one player is exceedingly missing the allotted.
Once you got back down again, it was bad.
When you get something like that.
So you can see, here's a guy, pretty tough guy, and he even has a hard time issuing pace of play penalties. It's not an easy thing to do. But as he mentions, putting players on the clock, which we do with a warning card, does improve the situation drastically. You'll see a drastic effect on how the players react to be given a warning card. But it's a situation where if it hasn't been done in GAN for quite a while, to tell you the truth. We haven't issued any pace of play penalties probably in several years. But if it comes down to needing to do it, it's something that someday we'll have to face if players don't react and we have a situation where it becomes unbearable for the rest of the field dealing with one particular player or one particular group. Dr. Foley, you had your hands raised. Did you want to unmute yourself and you got a question?
Yeah, I do. My feeling is that, especially with the younger kids, nobody has really taught them what it means to play within the 40, 50 seconds. Well, the 50 seconds for the first shot and the 40 seconds, for their shot. Because sometimes they don't even take a club out till the other person has finished, put their club away and started walking. And so I think there's a timing issue here. And I don't know when you get that message across. At the beginning of the tournament, they are not all there at the same time. So it's not a shotgun type of setup. So they are all coming at different times. So how do you provide that training of what it means, to play within the time?
That's a good question. If you see a slow player, if he's taking what you see to be longer than the allowed time to make a stroke, 40 seconds, given the fact that the player is, there's no distractions, the player is at his ball, he's walked up to his ball, there's nothing, inhibiting him to proceed. At some point in time, if you're going to talk to the player about the fact that he's taking too long, you may need to explain exactly what is involved in the 40 seconds. He may think 40 seconds is that he's given 40 seconds from the time he takes the club out of the bag. Or he may think that 40 seconds does not include getting yardage. 40 seconds would also include say a player's got a little bit of a blind shot, or say he wants to go to the green and look at the green before he makes a shot. Well, walking up to the green would be considered part of that 40 seconds, and walking back and making his stroke. That's all part of what he's given to make a stroke. So you need to make that clear sometimes to a player when you talk to players about the fact that they are exceeding their time.
Well, so is this something maybe making it a rule for each player to get to the starting point, the first or the 10th tee, whatever it is, and having some of this be part of the instructions, on what they need to do. Because, if you're on a hole like say number 3 at Forest Acres West, you are so busy yourself that sometimes getting to the player and providing that training actually ends up delaying things more. So can we just make the instruction part of our first tee instructions on when we start doing the 40-second count?
Yeah, Robert. So I'll tag in for Craig on this one. So before the tournament, we send players memos and all the information regarding the tournament. In that, we outline pace of play and how they'll be timed and how they need to have good times. Furthermore, as we said earlier today, it's on the scorecard. And I know myself and a lot of other people, when we start, one of the last things we say when we give them the starting instructions on 1 or 10 is to please keep up with the group in front of you and play ready golf and all that good stuff. So the players are made aware. As we all know, there's issues where players get slow during the rounds, but in my experience and probably a lot of other people's experience, if you just tell them that they're slow, a lot of times they'll speed up. I mean, and even in junior tournaments, I've seen on multiple occasions, I'll tell a group that they're slow, and next thing I know, I see them sprinting to the next tee, like literally running. So I think the players are made aware. And if not, I think it is wise when we first talk to them to reiterate that 40 seconds is the goal. And if they are on the clock, tell them they're on the clock. But I think overall, the players are made aware multiple times, and that's kind of we kind of get out of that by telling them, let's say they get told multiple times. So hopefully as they play more tournaments, they understand. But if it's like a 14 under new tournament, we're going to be more lenient in describing the rules, and we're not going to be as harsh. But like I said, in my experience, most of the times, once you tell a player they're slow, they'll speed up, which is ultimately the goal.
Okay, that's good to know, although sometimes you talk to the player and then they still keep doing it. I think one of the things we should do, and I know this is not very easy, we need to penalize people, because if there's something kids do, they talk. So here at Michigan State, I know that if I punish a student for breaking the rule, I don't have to tell anybody else about it, because everybody's going to find out. So I think sometimes you actually need to carry through with a threat so they know it's real. And I know that's hard, but.
Yeah, it is. As you guys might know, I have experience before the game where we gave out 5 or 6 pace of play penalties a week. So I'm more sympathetic of giving penalties, but then also from a whole GAM perspective, we are an amateur organization, and we need amateurs to play in our event. And yes, we don't want slow players to hurt and impact the whole entire field. But vice versa, we don't want to be giving out slow play penalties left, right, and center where it may detract them from coming back or give a bad impression on the game. So there's a fine line. There's probably different opinions even among the staff on pace of play penalties. But in the end, we're trying to put on the best golf tournaments. And if we can not penalize a player and get the desired result of them speeding up, that's the optimal goal. like I said, in my time, I haven't given at the game. I haven't given out a place to play penalty. I'm sure that might be different for other referees, but I think that's just a more bigger discussion that we would have spent more than 2 hours on just in the pace of play. Just different people's perspectives on pace of play and how harsh we want to be for amateur events or junior events or what have you.
Now, thanks, Robert. I mean, pace of play definitely is a concern for all of our tournaments, and it becomes a whole team effort to make sure pace of play works for any given day. And a lot of dialogue needs to take place for when we have players or groups that need to be talked to. But it's something that again, a lot of time can be spent on. So let's wrap up the portion on the trouble hole responsibilities document. I encourage the volunteers, especially the new volunteers, to go back out here to that webpage, the volunteer web homepage, and look at the different resources available to you. There is sorry.
Trying to get to.
I went to the given website. What did I do?
Well, you can just type in gam.org if you want.
The volunteer homepage has lots of resources. I was trying to get back to the volunteer homepage. I must have closed it down.
Just go to gam.org. Just click on the plus there.
I don't want to log back in.
Okay.
So if you want to review those documents, go to that webpage, volunteer page, and do that. If you want to search for John Paramore and Anna McPhee on YouTube, you can watch those entire interviews. They're somewhat interesting. I could go back here, right here. Is it? I guess not.
Well, it's gonna log you out.
I wanted to, so next week, I want to do a quick rules quiz, basic rules quiz. I want to show you how to get there. If you go to the USGA, you go to plane. If you go to, under plane, you go to rules of golf or education. For the quiz, if you also, a lot of you probably are, I would encourage you to read the rules 1 through 4 before next week. We'll be covering rules 1 through 4 next week. You can get there from the USGA website, or you can download the app from your smartphone. Or if you're near the game mouse, you can drop by and they'll give you a free rules book. But there's a rules of golf on the USGA website. Go to the rules of golf, and you can study the rules this way. There is you want to make sure you go to the full rules. And as you read 1 through 4, you'll want to check and make sure you're looking for interpretations for each rule. Usually has interpretations that give you additional information for each rule. So you can read the rules this way. I want to comment that as important as it is to read the rules, it's important to read your definitions. As you go through the rules, for example, rule 1, you'll see a word in italics. If you click on that, if you put your cursor on that word, you'll see the definition come up. Each one has their own, it'll show you the definition. You can look at the definition and read that further and continue. So you can bring up the whole definition. So, or down at the very bottom of the rules, there is the definition section down here where you can go to the definitions from the USGA.org. And if you really want to get into this thing, you can go to the rules clarifications where there are some clarifications that have been added for each rule. You can go, if you just go look at that quickly, you'll see that, bring that up, it tells you the different rules. You can go to, gives you the different rules and the clarifications that have been added since the rules book was written, since it was published. They've added clarifications on that. So any questions on how to get to your rules book and how to start reviewing rules before next week? All right, we're going to quickly do a rules quiz. Scroll down through, when you go to education, you can scroll down here. Here's your rules quizzes. It gives you options of either a printable quiz or an interactive quiz. We will do a basic 10 question quiz right now, and you can unmute yourselves and you can start providing answers for these questions. For a ball that lies in the general area, there is relief without penalty for interference from part of an immovable obstruction that is out of bounds. Any guesses at that one? Anybody, how about some new volunteers?
False.
I hear mostly falses on that. Okay, we'll go with false. For number 2, in match play, a player's ball comes to rest on the putting green while his or her opponent's ball comes to rest in an adjacent bunker. The opponent plays a wrong ball from the bunker that knocks the player's ball into the hole. What is the ruling? There is no penalty and the player's ball is holed. There is no penalty and the player's ball must be replaced. The opponent gets the general penalty for playing a wrong ball.
General penalty for the opponent.
Okay, this option here, the opponent gets a general penalty, which in match play general penalty is loss of hole. So that means the hole is over. Number 3, the committee selects the location, width, and depth of the teeing area. True or false?
It's gonna be like, does this have 2 yards? But it might be one of those trick questions.
Yeah, sometimes
It
these
is
USGA
a
questions-
trick. It is a trick question. The depth of the teeing area is specified in the rules. The committee
Right.
doesn't choose that.
False.
Yeah, the teeing area, if you go to the definition of teeing area, you'll see how that's defined, but yeah, the committee does not determine the depth, so this is gonna be false.
No,
I'm sorry, we have a different, pardon me?
no, I was gonna say that we don't determine the depth. That's 2 club lengths, so everybody knows.
Yeah, the USGA is tricky sometimes, so they try to trick us
Yeah,
up.
that darn USGA. I always have to remember too, you have to make sure you check to make sure whether the answer is the correct answer, because sometimes they're looking for an incorrect answer. Number 4, the edge of a penalty area should be defined by stakes, lines, or physical features. True or false?
I think it's true.
True.
Let's go with true on that.
Yeah, that's the language from the definition, I think.
Yeah, probably. Number 5, a referee assigned to a match must rule on any issue that comes to his or her attention to them.
True.
True.
Yeah, you'll see that in the definition of a referee in match play. If you see a rules breach, now let's see, we'll go with true. We'll see what. Number 6, which of the following is considered as damage on the putting green? Natural wear of the hole, ball marks, shoe damage, and scrapes caused by equipment or the flagstick, or aeration or grooves from vertical mowing. Which considered damage?
Ball marks.
Marks, shoe
Ball
damage.
marks and shoe damage.
Number 2.
2, the second option, okay. Another player deliberately lifts or moves a player's ball overhanging the hole before the waiting time of 10 seconds has ended. What is the ruling? First choice, there is no penalty and the ball must be replaced on its original spot. In match play, there is no penalty. The player's ball is treated as hold with the last stroke. In stroke play, there is no penalty. The player's ball is replaced on its original spot. What say you all?
Middle one.
Pardon me? Anybody, come on, some of these experienced rules officials, let's.
It's
B.
It's the match play answer.
It's a match play answer.
Yeah, in match play, we'll find that, we'll read about it, we'll go with that. Tom Hamilton's gonna join the call, and Tom, welcome, you've got 3 minutes to, Tom, how are you?
I'm fine.
The call's gonna be ending in 3 minutes. Did you have the wrong timeline on the calls are go from 10 to noon, Tom, okay?
Jesus.
Every Wednesday. Tom, you can answer number 8. Before making a stroke at a ball in the bunker, the player must not deliberately touch the sand with a hand, club, rake, or other object to test the condition of the sand to learn information about the next stroke. True or false?
True, true, true.
In stroke play, if a player returns a scorecard with a wrong score for any hole higher than the actual score, he or she is disqualified.
False.
False.
That's false.
Okay, here mostly falses. We'll go with false.
Mhm.
Score.
In stroke play, when starting the play of a hole, a player's ball played from the teeing area strikes a tree and comes to rest within the teeing area of the hole being played. The player presses down some heavy grass that is growing in the teeing area and removes dew, frost, and water in the teeing area before he or she plays. What is the ruling?
No penalty.
No penalty.
No penalty.
What?
You'll find out the answer is no penalty. You'll find if you look at the teeing area, the teeing area is a special area of the course. As you'll learn later, it's a specific area of the course that has its own little conditions that you're allowed to do things in the teeing area, only the teeing area. And I want to differentiate between teeing area and tee pad because, teeing area is that specific area of 2 club lengths. You can do certain things like mentioned in this question. So we'll submit the answers. You guys are all too good. So out of 10 questions, you got 10 correct. Perfect. I would encourage all of the volunteers to take these quizzes on the USDA website. You can vary between, if you go back and try again.
Basic, intermediate, advanced. That's what.
Try
Hey,
again. Again, you can vary the number of questions and you can vary the level.
Hey, Craig,
Yes, sir.
on the match play area where somebody played the wrong ball from the bunker, there could be situations where the person may not know he played the wrong ball. So after they were on the green and trying to putt or whatever.
Well, once it's been determined the player has played the match the wrong ball, even if the players don't realize it until they get to the next tee, the hole was considered lost as soon as that player played the wrong ball.
Yeah, but when do you find out that they played the wrong ball is what I'm asking. I mean, you may not know at the time they hit it that they had played the wrong ball.
Even if they find out, say they find out after the player has teed off on the next hole, because the player has gained information that his opponent was not aware of at the time the player played the wrong ball, that player could still make a claim and that hole would be considered a lost hole.
Oh yeah, I know. I was just, could we look at that question again? Because the answer sounded like, oh, we knew he played the wrong ball from the bunker, so the decision is made. And I'm just wondering.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't keep the quiz up. I should have left it up longer.
Oh, it's okay.
For questions on any particular question, I didn't leave it up. So
Robert, Craig, let me just jump in here. So Robert, when the quiz question says that he's played a wrong ball, it's assuming that we know that it's a wrong ball and it's 100% certain a wrong ball. If there was any doubt, they would mention that in the question. But if you see if it's written out that way, they're making the assumption that it has been determined and that criteria has been met.
All right, thanks.
All right, so that brings us to a close for today's rule session. We didn't really talk about any rules. We talked about administrative kinds of issues and how to make rulings. Hopefully you've learned some information that you didn't know before. I know a lot of you maybe were covered on your kind of during an orientation with with JW. Take your time to go over those areas again. If you have any questions, start reviewing the rules 1 through 4, or even further ahead. Start learning your definitions. The more I tell you, we want good rules officials, and the way you get to be a good rules referee is to become very familiar with the rules and the definitions. The definitions will help you an awful lot. I can't stress that enough. Definitions will help you most definitely during times you are trying to make a ruling. If you know your definitions, you're going to be in good shape. So thanks for all attending. Hope you all come back next week. Same time, 10 to 4. We're going to go through rules 1 through 4.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thanks,
See you.
Craig.
Thank you.
Yeah, Craig. One thing really quick to people, for those of you that don't have a rule book, if you're interested in getting one, reach out to me. I don't know, need to talk to Ken and get the exact policy and how we're going to do it. But if you don't have an official guide to the rules, reach out to me because you'll definitely want to have that. And we'll work on either getting that sent to you or how that's going to work. But if you are interested, let me know.
Thanks, Kyle. That's good. Yeah, go ahead.
He said he-